Hey, this is Juan from the Atlas development team, and today I'm going to show you how to use the Atlas Cards module. So let's go ahead and add our first Atlas Cards module to our page so we can review the fields. The first thing we want to take a look at here is the cards group. This is where you're going to be able to edit your cards content, create more of them, and rearrange them. Heading over to the grid alignment options is where you're going to be able to tweak how your cards respond to different resolutions and how they stick to your grid. If you check out the Styles tab, you're going to find multiple styling options that can then be overwritten inside the card's actual contents. For now, we're just going to get rid of these two cards and click on this edit button right here. The first thing we're going to see is the main content rich text field. Rich text fields can do a lot for you, and they have a lot of options for styling your text, but can also embed different elements such as links, images, call to actions, videos, and much more. If you're looking for an in-depth tutorial on what this type of field can do, we have another video tutorial for the custom rich text module, so make sure to check that one out. Coming up next, we have our image field, which represents an image that will show up at the top of your card. As you can see here, we can edit the alt text, set an exact width and height, or just set it to automatically adjust so that it will respond to different resolutions. Keep in mind that if you do this, you usually want to set up your maximum size limit, because the image original size is usually too big. So in this case, we're just going to limit it to 200 pixels. And that's a lot nicer. Moving on, we have our link/button section, where we can choose between a call to action button and a full card link, meaning that your whole card will be clickable. If you select it, you're going to see the settings to configure your link. You can make it link to an external URL, to a content on your account, such as a page or a blog post, to a file, email address, or blog listing page. If you select a button, you're going to see the text for your label. You can enable your image link, meaning that your image will be linking to the same URL as your call to action button, and then the group of settings to configure your link. In the form group, you can enable a form, create one on the spot, or just select a previously created one. But we're going to keep it disabled for now. The content alignment group allows you to set your column to the left, to the right, or to the center. The Overwrite Styles group allows you to set local styles for this specific card that will override the global styles set on the Styles tab. You can override the background, hover effects, and cursor effects once those are enabled from the Styles tab. The Animation on Scroll library allows you to set up multiple transition effects that trigger when your cards enter or leave the viewport. Since this is a feature of all of Atlas's modules, we're not going to go too deeply into this one, but there's going to be a link in the description below to another Novel Space article that has a video going through all of these settings and all of the things you can do with them. So I have created a couple cards now, duplicating them from the original one that we just created, and we're going to head over to the Styles tab to see how these global settings will affect all of these cards. We're going to start by checking out the button group. We have a ton of options here. We're going to head over to the background one, and as you can see, you can enable the overrides for specific settings, so you can choose what you want to override from the default button. I'm gonna enable the background and change it to this color, for example. We're gonna head over to border. I'm gonna make it black so that we can see the difference. We can also change the width on it, so we're gonna add another pixel here. We can change the text color. We're gonna make it black as well. Border radius, for this we're gonna add a very high value, for example, so that the borders will be completely rounded. We can check out the font size. I'll say this value is fine, but we can also adjust the font weight, so we're going to make it bold. For padding, we have the horizontal value and vertical value. The padding represents the space between your button's border and your label. So if we were to make our button a little bit more flat, we will adjust the vertical padding, and let's reduce this to, for example, 8 pixels. Then we have the background hover color and border hover color. So this is optional. You can enable it if you want your border and background to change color whenever you hover over it. If you do, for example, I'm going to keep it blue, and we're going to see the difference right now once I apply our changes. As you can see, our button has changed completely and it has a different color when I hover over it. Now this has a transition and you can see it once you click on preview, and there it is. If we head back, our last setting will be the full width. So if we enable this toggle, now this button will stretch to fill the entire card. So heading back to the Styles tab, we're going to check out the box shadow. Once we enable it, you're going to see that you can choose between a small, a regular one, or a large one. We're going to keep it on regular for now. And then we have the box shadow color. What you usually want to do is keep it black. This is the HTML color code for black. And set up a transparency value. The default is 30% and the result is this kind of grayed out effect on the black. And if we apply it, this is how this will look. Moving on to the border settings, once we enable it, you can see that we can choose the width for it. Let's make it a little bit wider so that it's more noticeable. We can select the color, let's use this pink color that we've been using, and we can also adjust the transparency to make it a little bit more subtle. We're going to use 50% for example, and this is how that will look like. With the border radius settings, we're going to be able to round up the corners of our cards. So we're going to set this to 12 pixels for example. And it's going to look like this. And with the padding setting, we're going to be able to set the spacing between the border of your card and your card's contents for each side. So we have top, bottom, left, and right. The background settings allows you to choose between a color, an image, or a gradient. If I select color, I can simply choose one and adjust the transparency as well. If I select image, I can choose, for example, this background right here. I can select an alt text and then choose a sizing for it. If I select cover, my image will be cropped to fill my card. If I select contain, the entirety of my image is going to be rendered, which is especially useful for some assets. And if I select stretch to fill, my image will simply be deformed to fit my card. The background image filters allow you to set different effects to your background image. Once you enable one, you can see that the default value is set to something that won't affect your card, so we're going to need to change that. The blur effect adds an out of focus effect to your background image. So if I select 4 for example, we can see how the background now has less definition. The grayscale filter diminishes the amount of color in your card, so if I set it to 100%, it will be just black and white, but I can also just set it to something in between. The brightness filter can add or remove light from your card. And finally, the scale can enlarge or diminish the size of your card. You can also turn on multiple of these at the same time. The gradient option allows you to have smooth transition between two colors as a background. And you can also select the direction of this gradient, from horizontal, vertical, top left to bottom right to bottom left, and radial. The hover effect group allows you to set different effects that will then be animated when a user hovers their cursor above your card. The transition time sets how long will your transitions take. If you set higher values, it will result in smoother, slower transitions. If you set lower values, these will be snappier and quicker. Now if you set a background color on the background settings, we're going to be able to see the background color group fill on the hover effects, and once we apply it, our cards will take a different color when we hover over them. As you can see, there's no animation here because we are in the editor and we will need to preview our page to see the animation. If you selected background image on your background settings, then you're going to be able to set background image filters. Let's say I want to enable a scale, and I'm going to scale it a little bit. Whenever I head over to my preview, I can see that my cards now have a scale on the background on hover. The box shadow effect allows you to set a different size and color for your box shadow. So in this case, we're going to set it to large, and we're going to see how it transitions in our preview. The scale effect allows you to change the dimensions of your card, whether you want to make it bigger or smaller. I'm going to increase it just a bit right now, and we're going to see it on the preview, which goes really well with the shadow effect. The offset Y setting allows you to change the position of your card in the vertical axis. If you want to make it move up, you need to use negative values, and if you want to make it move down, you need to use positive values. The cursor effects interact with your user's cursor. The glow effect creates a flashlight-like effect, and the tilt effect creates a 3D-like effect that makes your card lean forward or away from your cursor. Once we enable the glow effect, we can adjust its color, transparency. We're going to give it a little bit of a yellow color. We can adjust its size, so we're going to make it a bit bigger. And the blur as well, which will diffuminate your light and make it a little bit more easing. So we're going to set it to 20. We're going to check that out in the preview mode. And this is how it looks like. The tilt effect, once we enable it, we can adjust its strength. We're going to make it quite strong so that it's visible. We're going to check it out in the preview. And we can also invert its direction. Now we're going to check out the grid alignment options. As you can see, I have reduced the lengthiness of the content of this card, and it sticks to the top compared to the other two ones. This is because the vertical alignment setting is set to top, which is the default. We're going to set it to center to see how that looks. And as you can see, it now just stays on center. And we can also set it to bottom and stretch to fill, which make it have the same height for all cards, and it will also make the button stick to the button. The horizontal gap setting allows you to set the distance between your cards, so we're going to set it to 60 pixels, for example. And as you can see now, the gap is a lot bigger. Now, in order to see the vertical gap in action, we're going to force our cards to a second row. We can do that either by increasing the horizontal gap a lot, or we can just head over to our section and limit the space that our content is going to take. So we're going to change this to 800 pixels, and we can see that now our cards are breaking their line. If I head over to the vertical gap and increase it, you will see this space getting bigger. Now, if I wanted this card to have the same width as these other two instead of stretching, I can do so by heading over to the Enable Match Width section and limit the width for all of my cards. So you will need to play around with it to see what works best for your cards, but as an arbitrary value, I know that 360 pixels works good. As you can see, they're all now the same size. Say I have this set up with 5 cards, and I want to change the horizontal position of these two at the bottom. I can do so with the horizontal alignment option. If I set it to space between, for example, this will maximize the space in between, but I can also just space them around. Or space them evenly. Now let's say I have a background image that is kind of limiting the visibility of my text. We can fix that with the background image filters. I'm going to head over to my card, and first thing, change the color of the text to white. That's a bit more visible, but it's still not perfect. So we're going to head over to Styles, Background Image Filters, and we can enable the brightness, and we're going to tone down a bit to 70%, for example. And as you can see now, my text is much more visible. Now let's take advantage of the fact that we have set a background image filter and turn that into a hover effect. We're going to head over to the Styles tab, Hover Effects, Background Image Filters, and we're going to enable the brightness. We're going to tone it up from 70 to something like 90, where the text will still be kind of visible. Check it out in a new preview. And as you can see, when I hover over my card, it gets highlighted. Now let's say I want to have multiple cards with different backgrounds on the same effect. I don't need to set up the effect again because those are set in the Styles tab. which is globally applied to the card. So I'm going to clone my card, and I can edit just the background image individually for each one of them. So I'm going to head over to Overwrite Styles, Overwrite Background, Image, and if I just change the image to a different animal, it won't have any effect on the other effects. So that's all for today. Feel free to reach out to us to our email support in the description below, and check out our premium support if you're looking for custom development work. Catch you guys in the next one.